Yeah, this is Land Diesel. Man, today I was watching this video, right? I got to listen to dude speak, right? So I'm gonna let y'all hear what I'm talking about. I think dude got some valid points, and you can take some notes from this, man. You might learn something, young man. You know what I'm talking
about? Yeah, I get that a lot from non-Muslims, sometimes even from Muslims, the people who say, I like everything that you say. It's all reasonable and logical up until you bring religion into it. I agree with everything up until you bring up all that Islam stuff. Well, that just tells you where your own logic and your own sense reach their limit. Your reasonableness can only go along with me up until that point, and then your reasonableness runs out. This isn't where my rationality and logic and sense end. It's where yours ends. You agree with me up to that point, and then you hit a roadblock. That's your obstacle, not mine. You think I'm right in what I'm saying up to the point where you're wrong. They'll say, why do you have to bring religion into it? But that's the wrong question. Why do you bring secularism and atheism into it? I mean, why do you irrationally and illogically insist that religion must be illogical and irrational, when all you've been hearing from me so far is nothing but reason and logic all along? No, I'm not going to leave religion out of it. Just because your capacity for reason and logic can't cope with it, just because your capacity for reason and logic end at that point, you don't get to impose on the Muslims all the biases and prejudices that you have developed over the course of your Western history, because you had an irrational and an illogical religion imposed upon you. The religion that you're thinking about is not our religion. And your assumptions are derived from your own experience with that religion, not ours. I mean, religion did not impede our civilization from critical thinking, from scientific thought, from rationality, and so on. That wasn't us. Our civilization produced monumental scholars with erudition in a broad assortment of fields and disciplines. And they were all religious people. No, you're like someone who got cheated in a real estate scam one time, so you think houses don't exist. Just because you got fooled one time doesn't mean that everyone who buys a property is a fool.
Yeah.
That was you.
Man, that was you, homie.
You're going to have to get used to this.
Exactly.
You're not going to be able to dominate our discourse anymore. You're not going to get to dictate to us what we can and cannot talk about or how we talk about it. And you're the last people in the world to tell anyone else on earth about logic, reason, and sense. Your Western so-called Enlightenment civilization is a monstrosity in human history. Well, you've committed genocide after genocide, and you're committing one right now in Gaza. Your logical, rational, reasonable European powers obliterated the Native Americans. You systematically dehumanized and enslaved Africans for centuries. You carried out population extermination in Namibia, in Congo, in Algeria, and on your own continent against the Jews, the Holocaust, the Gypsies, the Muslims in Bosnia, on and on. So yeah, you made sense. I was following your reason and your logic up until you brought in that genocidal mass murder. That's where you lost me. You can't talk about rationality and reason. You must be joking. Man. You can only say that if you live inside of your own Western propaganda echo chamber. It's an absurd thing. It's just as absurd as calling yourselves democracies. You created societies that sacralize wealth, that sanctify the rich, giving them mere holy authority. You didn't abandon the papal tyranny. You just shifted it into the morality-free private sector. It makes sense to you in your enlightened logic and reason that sick people in your societies, for example, can suffer and die if they're poor, and that every human interaction and every human endeavor should be monetized in order for it to have any value, and whatever can be monetized should therefore be socially acceptable and respectable, no matter how deranged and perverse it is. Reason and logic. Do you know that about a third of Westerners believe in astrology? About half of them, and just under half of them, believe in aliens and spaceships, and over half of them believe that Atlantis existed.
Man.
Over half of them also think that they can will something into existence by writing it on a wish board and just thinking about it hard enough, visualizing it. Your society's literally indoctrinated you out of thinking. You replaced the church which manipulated you for centuries and gaslit you into so that you wouldn't think for yourselves. And you just replaced that with the state, with the private sector, with mass media and entertainment. And they do the same thing to you, but even more effectively and even more thoroughly. But instead of telling you that it makes you pious, they tell you that it makes you rational. Well, you weren't pious then and you're not rational now. You're just an automaton, living paycheck to paycheck, sinking in debt, estranged from your family, living out fantasies in your head about what you're going to be when you grow up. Meanwhile, you're in your 40s. You identify more with the brand names that you wear than with your own name. No? You don't know your neighbors, most likely. You binge watch for hours and hours watching Netflix just to escape the drudgery and pointlessness of your existence. And meanwhile, you think like more than 50% of Americans think that their life is worthy of becoming a book or a movie. And so you sit around thinking about which celebrity will play you in a movie about a man sitting on a couch. Honestly, you must have no idea what your societies look like to the rest of the world. And I mean, we can look at it layer by layer. You know, any dimension of your societies, we could catalog the derangement and the pathologies and the irrationality, the illogic and the self-delusion. At any level, it's breathtaking. On the macro level and on the micro level. I mean, on an individual level, the overwhelming majority of Westerners just carry thoughts and opinions in their minds that were implanted in their brains, not anything that they thought of themselves, not anything that they ever even scrutinized themselves. I mean, I had one man complaining to me about the soaring crime rates in Ireland because supposedly of the influx of refugees and immigrants. You know, he was arguing with absolute conviction that this was the case, that this was absolutely true. Okay, but the crime rates in Ireland are at their lowest level since the 1990s.
Man.
He didn't even do that basic, obvious research before he was blasting out his moral outrage. I mean, how do you live your life like that? That has to manifest in so many other areas of life. I don't even know how you dress yourself in the morning. This is why you all think that AI is so impressive, because already your intelligence is artificial.
Damn.
Already, every time when you speak, you're doing nothing but regurgitate words and phrases that you found on the internet. There's no thought going on there. Don't even let me get started talking about the macro level. Just look at Germany. That's enough for you. Look what Europe is doing to themselves. Your leaders are literally deindustrializing and sabotaging your countries, and you're sitting around baffled as to why that's happening. Because you have nothing to do with logic and reason and rationality. You can't understand reality when it's slapping you across your face.
Damn.
And then you imagine that you can tell the Muslims what is and what is not rational. You're a living satire. But in our history, we have a continuous stream of intellectual brilliance. And until now, if you have access to the podcasts and lectures from the Muslim world, you would learn what actual discussion is supposed to be like. The intellectual giants of this ummah stand like mountains above the West, precisely because their minds were illuminated by the light of Islamic knowledge, and yes, by reason, and an unyielding commitment to critical thinking from the golden era of Al-Andalus, the majestic halls of Timbuktu. The scholars of Islam were architects of wisdom, delving into the realms of mathematics, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, on and on, with a profound mastery that still staggers the imagination. Their intellectual brilliance wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't in spite of their religion, it was because of it. Now let's be crystal clear. The Islamic civilization's intellectual prowess was never at odds with the teachings of our faith. Reason and critical thinking and logic were like a pulse that's beating in sync with the heartbeat of Islam. Islamic scholars understood that the Quran is not a book to shackle the intellect, but a beacon guiding seekers of knowledge. In the history of Islamic thought, reason and revelation function together, not separately. It's a legacy that challenges all of the Western misconceptions that faith stifles reason. That was true of your faith, not ours. No, the genius of Islamic civilization elevated the mind and the spirit in unison. The very fact that that has never been the case with you in the West shows that your faith was flawed to begin with, and your reason is still too flawed to even understand that that's what the problem was all along. But no, you're going to have to get used to this. You're going to have to get used to Islam permeating discourse in any number of topics. Because there's a revival going on. There's a rejuvenation. You can call it a renaissance, and it's an Islamic renaissance. And we're entering the Islamic Enlightenment. And it's an end to the Western Dark Ages, the dark ages of colonization and imperialism. We made the mistake of eating from your tree with its poison fruit. And in so doing, we wandered away from our roots, the roots of our tree. And our tree is the tree of knowledge. But we wandered away to get a taste of what you had. And because of that, we got cast down. And it's a familiar scene. But just like Adam, alayhi salam, we know our mistake now. We don't want anything from you now. And we won't listen to you now. We don't want your fruit anymore. We don't want any of your products. Whether it's material, intellectual, or spiritual. We don't want any of it. So if a crazy person tells you that you're being unreasonable, well, that must mean that you hit the nail on the head, and it's just their insanity that can't process what you're saying. So I suggest, once again, that you just get used to it. You get used to having things framed in the Islamic paradigm, because there's going to be more and more of that. And if you listen, you might just eventually realize that there is no more rational or reasonable or logical framework for understanding the world than the Islamic framework. And you might just end up understanding what's been done to you all these years and understand what you've been doing to us. And maybe, if you listen, maybe we can move forward together to snatch our collective future out of the clutches of the powers that be, who have been dumbing you down all these years and telling you that you're smart. And the powers that be that have been trying to make you hate us to your own detriment. Precisely because they wanted you to be dumb, and they knew that if you listen to the Muslims and you listen to Islam and you learn about Islam, well, that's going to foil all their plans.
Yeah. I think homeboy has some good points there, man. You know, sometimes you just gotta get away from some of the stuff on the internet, or just listen to some information that might better yourself, you know, especially if it's the truth. I'm Land Diesel, by the way. I got to get up out of here, y'all. Peace. Yeah, now.